Good evening to all you wonderful viewers out there, Guyanese in Guyana and in the diaspora. Tonight, I have the pleasure of bringing to you the facts as we always do. And tonight, I'm joined by my colleague, none other than Ewart Marshall, an executive member of the Alliance Change. Ewart, it's a pleasure to have you here this evening with us. I know you have vast knowledge as to what is going on here, and I believe that it will be prudent for us to get a comparison as to what is going on in the US right now. How are Guyanese feeling in the US? What are the responses and the comments that you're getting from your relatives in Guyana? How dependent are persons in Guyana to persons living in the diaspora, given these very trying times and so on? So, Ewart, welcome, welcome, welcome to this evening's program.
Thank you, Jaretta. Thank you. And good night to everyone in Guyana. It's my pleasure to take part in this. What I hope to do tonight is to contribute something from the diaspora's perspective. The Guyanese diaspora is large and it's spread all over the world, but for the most part, it's concentrated in the United States. And, we stay connected through our friends and relatives, and some of us go back and forth between the United States and Guyana quite often. And so we're well aware of what's going on. And we know that Guyanese know what's going on here as well. So I hope to, add to the conversation in that respect.
And I want to note from the very beginning that we should be joined a little later by Dr. Vincent Adams. And he's no stranger to this platform. He has been speaking out throughout the process from day one, whilst we were in government. He's been speaking out when we are in opposition also. So he should be joining us a little later in the discussion. But Ewart, I want to, the first thing, we're starting this program off on a very sad note, I must say, because we had a very disturbing event last night in which a woman lost her life to domestic violence. And this is a matter I just don't want to just sweep aside, because this is a human life. And I want to say condolences, sincere condolences from the Alliance for Change to the children and family members of Malini Wahid. I believe that's her name, if I'm saying it correctly. But the entire situation was extremely bad. I listened to the news report. I know Travis Chase was out there in last evening, and persons that spoke about what transpired. The neighbor, I know she is completely hurt about what went on. And every time we see these things in the newspaper, it's the same line that we see keep repeating itself, that this person have been experiencing domestic violence by the hands of this abuser for years. This has been going on for years, and every time someone loses their life to such situations, that is what we read. But there was a little bit more that I think was said. And one of the things that persons were very upset about is that the domestic violence hotline, persons have reported that they were calling the hotline and they were getting absolutely no response at that time. Those are one of the more glaring seriousness that we have to deal with right about now. And another one is, I am noting that the Guyana Daily News is reporting that a senior government official was aware of the abuse being suffered by this woman, and that person would have been intervening in the matter to get the abuser off. So I'm going to just say from the very inception right now that if those allegations are true, that person should be held accountable by law, and everyone and anyone that is aiding domestic violence and helping an abuser to continue a path of abuse should be held accountable by the law. Ewart, what are your thoughts on this matter?
Well, first of all, my condolences to the family. This was someone's wife, someone's sister, someone's mother or grandmother, someone's friend, and this is a human life that was tragically lost. Domestic violence is something that while it may on the surface seem like something relatively easy to solve, it, if for some reason it confounds us, we 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 haven't been able to put a handle. And when I say we, people around the world, because this is not just a Guyanese phenomenon. It happens in the United States, of course. Every week or every month, you hear of some tragedy involving some battered woman or something like that. But let me say this: we as people who love peace, who love tranquility in the home, have to be concerned that in these times of a pandemic and higher cost of living and all of that, that we pay attention to these things, because it seems to me, from what I've read, from what I've heard, that people are going through a lot of stress. No one more so than a wife being battered, and so we have to make these people in these situations, these women, feel that they have some place to go or some place to call, and that um, they're not left to the violence. Even if the civil society or the private sector has to set up their own hotlines or counseling, we have to do something about it. Perhaps maybe the government is not the place that can solve this problem, but we have to address it.
I want to just pause for a moment on that note, Ewart. I want to welcome Dr. Vincent Adams to the program this evening. Dr. Adams, like I said before, is no stranger to the program, and we always welcome his expertise that he brings, his vast knowledge that he brings to the table. So, welcome, Dr. Adams.
Thank you, Joretta. Nice to be here once again. I'm becoming this is becoming, second nature to me now. you know, I'm gonna ask for citizenship of Belize or something here pretty soon.
Well, everyone in the
Well,
Guyana
now that
knows you,
we're on
Dr.
social
Vince.
media, most person believe it. Back to the discussion that we're having, one of the things that is glaring to me is that our hotline, there was this big announcement, a launch of the domestic violence hotline by the Minister Vindhya Prasad, and then here we are, persons are saying that they're calling the hotline and no one is answering it, no one is there to take their call, a matter as serious as that. And we cannot just brush past these things because persons' lives are at stake. Someone that has confidence, so well, person should have confidence rather that if they pick up the phone and they call the domestic violence hotline, they are going to get a response because they are victims and they're in need of assistance immediately. We don't have a time span that when somebody goes, somebody don't go home and abuse their wife or their husband, because this is both sides. Persons don't get abused on specific time period. So the domestic violence hotline can be working only certain hours. Therefore, it doesn't make sense if that is the setup, and that's what it appears to be at that point. I want to note also, Ewart, something you just touched on. Region 2 was calling, the news reported today that Region 2, yesterday I believe rather, that Region 2 is asking for them to have a shelter for abuse victims. And these are things that we need to be looking into. Civil society needs to play its role and work hand in hand with those victims. And we need not to have a mentality as a lot of persons do, that, oh, you don't get in man and woman's story, because a lot of times those are the reasons why victims of abuse are left in abusive situations, and they ended up, a lot of them, losing their lives at the very end. So, Dr. Vince, what are your comments on this issue?
Well, and I think it's a serious issue, and to me it's not taken as seriously as it should be. It should be, when we talk about criminal activities in Guyana, it should be right up there in terms of priorities, and we should be treating it as a major, as a major crime. And the thing is, especially the women. I know that there's abuse of men too, but I think it's more common on the other side. When the female when females realize that they're not, and I guess it's a culture that allows this to happen, when they realize they're not getting the kind of support or backing, when they go and they make complaints, whether it's to the police or to whoever they go to, and they're not taken seriously, and it's accepted that you have this preeminence of the male, the male gender over the female, and they're not getting, the any kind of um, response, positive response in their favor. They also tend to accept it and believe it's part of, the way of life. And so that's what feeds this entire culture. So, it's really important that then we need, and then it goes from generation to generation. And that is why this age should be taken. We need some really, bold, like I use my friend's phrase here, bold leadership to make some formed decisions and stick with it and hold people accountable. If the police are not responding in the way that they should, to help out the situation and to make life better to people so that they're not intimidated and they're not threatened, their lives are not threatened, and they're not living in fear, people should be held accountable for that. But it's a serious matter.
Are there any women's support groups that were aware of this and attempted to, help or stop the situation?
Well, I can't speak to this specific situation, but there are a number of groups that are doing a lot of work. I know Blossom is one of those that is doing a lot of work to intervene and try to make a difference in the lives of Guyanese. But we have to acknowledge the challenges, and I want to just mention, because I actually want to spend a little bit of time on this. That's why I'm doing it, because persons are logged into this show right about now, and I don't know how many of them actually are in situation themselves and they need advice on how to deal with it. What I can tell you is that we have a system in place at the police station that is on, and I often say that what's on paper is not usually what prac- what's the practice at these institutions, because what's on paper is that there's a zero tolerance for domestic violence when it comes to law enforcement at the level of the police station. There's zero tolerance. It simply means that once a woman goes to the police station and she makes a report, then she doesn't have the ability to say, well, oh, well, I want to drop the charges now, and I don't want to proceed with it to court. The zero tolerance says that once the report is made, the case has to go to court. But that is what is on theory, that is what is on paper. What is actually happening is that when women go and make the report, then you have someone calling up, the abuser goes and he tries to make a link here and call a friend there. And you have a system that is so corrupt that at the end of the day, that matter is just brushed aside and swept under the carpet. We have situations also in which there are some police stations I can note, like up in the upper Mazaruni, that have zero women police officers. So those environments, they're not conducive, they're not encouraging for any woman to go and make a report, because the law also stipulates that if a woman is abused and she goes to the police station, then a female police officer should be the one accompanying her to get a medical, and then that female police officer have to write a report, and that report have to accompany the report that she is making when it goes to court. But now when you have police outposts that have absolutely no female police officer, what woman is going to go there and make a report? So there's a lot of issues that needs to be fixed within the system if we're actually serious about this. And I don't want us to just brush past the fact that Guyana Daily News is reporting that it is alleged that a senior government official was actually involved in getting off the abuser when the woman was trying to get legal help. So that is an allegation that we can't brush aside, and that person needs to be held accountable.
Yeah, Dorette, you see, and I absolutely agree with you, and we need to be serious about holding people accountable. But you see, the other thing, why it's so ingrained too in our culture and our history is it economics has a lot to do with it also. We grew up in this culture of dependency where especially the female always depend on the male as the breadwinner of the house. So the female, so the male believes that, well, this is their power, to have a stranglehold over their female partners. And when they get into this situation, the female has a choice now. Should I go and prosecute, and then I don't have a place to live, I don't have food to eat, I don't have any, I cannot provide for myself, so they've got to stay in that abusive relationship. So that all of that has to be taken into consideration in the planning of of as we move forward with our planning as to how money should be spent, and in programs, education, for example, we need to provide opportunities for all, especially females under those circumstances, training, education, provide entrepreneurship, providing that foundation for them to become independent, housing, their own housing. If they're in an abusive relationship, do they have a place where they could be housed, and provide them with the means such as training while they're being housed in those temporary locations, provide the means for them to survive, and to get them on their feet in terms of training, jobs and those type of things. So all of that have got to be. So it's not just prosecuting, but the other end is to help them becoming independent, so that they won't have to continue to live in that environment.
I agree, Dr. Vince. It comes down to these abused women understanding that people are there to help them and support them in their time of need. If they know that they have support, then they're more likely to report these things and perhaps get out of these abusive relationships. I know in the case of New York and many communities in the United States, there are homes set up just for women in this situation, where they can come and stay for a little while and get their lives back on track. And with Guyana's newfound wealth, I don't think there's any reason why these sorts of establishments couldn't be set up where a woman could come and stay for a night or two or whatever, whatever the situation is, to get away from this brutal situation.
Yeah, and I just want to end on that particular discussion. I want to just say again, our sincere condolences to the children and family, and we as a country, Guyana has lost. Whenever a life is lost, the country loses. And on that note, Alliance for Change expresses sincere condolences. Now, as we move forward, Ewart and Dr. Adams, as we move forward into the discussion, I actually want to read an extract from the Starbrook News. And the Starbrook News reported that a World Bank survey finds Guyana among countries facing worrisome food insecurities due to the pandemic. An extract from that, it states the survey conducted between May and July of this year found that as a consequence of labor market setbacks, just over half of the households in the region have not yet managed to recover their pre-pandemic income levels. The inability of the households to return their income level to pre-pandemic levels put their food security at risk. Now in Guyana, we would have noted that the took office during the pandemic, and they went into office and they fired persons left, right, and center. They were least concerned about the labor market impact, and they were least concerned about the household impact that would cause. Today, we're getting these reports. And what are your thoughts, Sid? What is going on? What are your families saying? Because I know both of you are in the diaspora. What is the feedback that you are getting from persons on the ground? I'm going to come back with some of the facts as to why this is happening.
Well, this is something that seems to be affecting the whole world. We've heard recently. Correct me if I'm incorrect, Dr. Vince, but I understand that inflation in the United States is hovering somewhere around 7% or something like that. Um, Prices have gone up all over the world, and certainly in our hemisphere. There's also the issues with the supply chain. Where supplies, food and supplies and things are not getting to the consumers from their manufacturers or markets and things like that. And there are many other factors, but certainly these things lend themselves to the food insecurity that Guyana would be experiencing. Dr. Vince, if you want to add something about that.
No, you're right on, Ewart, and it's affecting the entire world. We know even in countries, probably the most powerful countries such as the U.S., we are going through the same thing. But we've got some safety nets. We've got the past $1 trillion programs, etc., where every household they get a check or employed. So we've got that safety net that but we don't have those type of things, privileges in countries such as Guyana. But one and Doretta touched on a very important thing here that I think we, with the government coming to office and getting rid of, highly skilled employees that are involved in planning long-term strategic programs for the development of the country. And when you get rid of that knowledge base and those type of skills, you've lost that ability to even adjust. Now that we're in this situation, how do we get out? Guyana, for example, and I've always said, and I've said this publicly, Guyana should never be in a situation where we have food shortages. Guyana is, and I always say, and I mean it, we are probably the most blessed country on the planet. All the richest countries, you know what they have? The only thing that they have, most of the richest countries in the world, in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, you could Norway and all of those countries. The only thing that they have is oil, and a lot of them, the only other thing that they've got is deserts. Guyana now has oil. We've got all the minerals you can think about. Most importantly, we've got water, more than we can probably handle. We call the land of many waters. We've got great climate that we can have agriculture 12 months a year. You know how many countries in the world envy us, including countries such as the United States, and Russia and those places that produce quite a bit of food. They only have 3 years of food production. The other thing is that
3 months.
3 months. I said 3 years, and we are not taking advantage of our situation and in terms of our planning to put into our plan. Here is a good perspective for you. The United Nations, they declared up to just a few years ago that when I was working with the government that we had to pay attention to and deal with. They said by the year 2050, the world food production would have to be doubled. 2050 is less than 30 years from now. I still intend to be around then. And half of Guyana's population is only 25 years old. So almost the entire Guyana population will be around then. But the problem is, even though you have to double food production in such a short period of time, they're fearful that because of climate change, a lot of countries will not be able to produce that kind of a food. So you're hamstrung by less capacity to produce, where you have to produce more food. So guess where they have identified to help produce most of that additional food? In our hemisphere. In our area, we're sitting right in the middle of where they're expecting that food should be coming from. So we should be looking at those type of things and start planning ahead to say here we want to be not only part of the bread basket of the Caribbean that we were used to be called, but the breadbasket of the entire world. We've got all the natural resources for it, water, land, and everything else. So that's where we should be planning. But going back to what Joretta was alluding to, we just willy nilly get rid of all of these experienced young professionals. These are young people. These are not, you know, forget about me. I've been there. I've had my profession. I've been there, done that. But all of those, thousands of young professionals who could have been able to be part of that skills level, we just really nearly got rid of them. But that's the kind of planning that we need to look ahead and put Guyana in a position where it can be the breadbasket of the world. We all is only going to be here for, I don't know, 30 years, maybe. What is going to happen after all? I've always said, all is not the future of Guyana, it's agriculture. Agriculture is the future of Guyana. People will have to have food to live on, and that's where we need to be focusing. But we need to take the oil money and invest it in things like in education, agriculture, etc. And I guess we're going to get to that part. You're talking about the sovereign wealth fund, etc. So to get to Joretta's point, that's where we were already in a deep hole created by this pandemic that all the other countries are suffering, but we've gone and even dig a deeper hole by getting rid of the skills level and the people that we should be keeping on board, to make sure that they can have clear thinking and thoughts as to how to move forward and address this problem for the future. We can't do anything about it now because it has happened, but we need to plan as to, okay, how do we get out of it like most countries are doing.
That is absolutely correct, Vince. And first of all, let me apologize for my neighbor's dog because this is the second program I'm on where the neighbor's dog is just at it. I don't know what's going on
Maybe
over there.
maybe maybe you sure the dog is not a PPP dog.
I'm not too sure right now. So moving back to the discussion, what I can say is that first of all, I want to note a couple of things. The first thing that I want to note is that the last report we had from the Bureau of Statistics was actually reporting that we have a at that point, which was July, the inflation rate in the price of food items was 14%. That a whooping 14%, and that was expected to climb. So I'm not sure what it's at right now. And coupled with that, I know you spoke about the fact that the US have safety nets in which it's used to cushion the impact of such, so as to safeguard persons and food altogether. Now in Guyana, we had a flood, and as you guys would recall, in which agricultural products were severely damaged. Persons had lots of losses in that sector, and the government came to the National Assembly and they asked for $10 billion to be injected to cushion that. That was the intent. That was what it was, how it was spelled out in the National Assembly. Basically, to cushion the effect and to compensate persons for the losses they suffered, so that they would be able to move forward, so that we wouldn't be sinking ourselves in a deeper hole. But what we learned after is that the distribution process for that particular grant that was given out was such a corrupt process that persons that never planted anything in their life was collecting monies. And because of that, the people that actually lost so much was not compensated. Some of them not compensated at all, and some of them meagerly compensated. So what that created, and Mr. Ramjatan did an excellent job at breaking it down before. What that did was, because if I was farming, for example, and I had tremendous losses, and my neighbor was not farming, no losses, and then the government came and gave my neighbor a huge compensation, $4 or $5 million, and came to me and give me absolutely nothing in some cases, and in some cases a meager $50,000 and say, well, that's your compensation. What happens is that now, as a farmer, I would not have enough money to go and re-inject in and make new investment into food, and we have been contributing in so forth to insecurity of food. And the government sees how it is when you have a situation in which everything that is done under corrupt practices. There is very little hope for the country altogether, and this is what we've been seeing all along. Keyword, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are this. The Caribbean already has an estimated 4 billion US dollars, food bill, import bill. For instance, I spent time in Barbados, visiting in-laws, and I'm always struck by when I go into the food markets and the grocery stores, the supermarkets, and I'm seeing items from Canada and New Zealand and Australia and Europe, and I rarely see anything from Guyana. And Guyana's right there. So of course there's a 4 billion US dollar import food import bill for the region. I believe that the region needs to work together to not only reduce the cost of this food that we import, but also to partner with each other, because some countries are better at producing this or that, and there's no reason why the Caribbean region, through CARICOM or whatever mechanism, shouldn't work together to help each other. Guyana certainly has the land space to plant food and grow food for the rest of the Caribbean. For instance, if you could fit almost all of the Caribbean countries in in the space of Guyana, so we have the space, we have the water, the sunlight, of course, is abundant, and I think that. Our region could do a much better job of feeding itself, and certainly, mitigating the effects of food shortages and insecurity and things like that.
That is absolutely correct. Dr. Vince, I saw you want to jump in
Yeah,
here.
yeah, no, I mean, I can't overemphasize that there is no reason. I think it's just totally, to me, negligence, and I'm not speaking of any single political party. I think it's absolute negligence that Guyana at this time, 2021, would be in this position of being food, where we have this high food insecurity, where we got an inflation of what, 14% on food items. It should not have been happening in Guyana, with all the reasons that you would get, the elements that we have, the positive elements that a lot of countries would envy us, even in the Caribbean. Remember again, and Doretta, you might even be, young to know that Guyana at one time was without question the breadbasket of the
Bread
Caribbean.
basket of Caribbean.
That is how we have so many Caribbean people from the Caribbean, from St. Lucia, from Barbados, that became Guyanese. They became part of the Guyana mix, because this is where most of the people were migrating, not away from Guyana, but into Guyana. So there is absolutely no reason. And a lot of people believe that my background is agriculture, the way that I speak of agriculture, but it has to be our future underpinning of the economy. We should not be complaining. Now, Ewart talks about seeing products from a lot of countries. Hell, how about Jamaica? Every place I go, I see products from Jamaica. And I think what we what, like 20 times the size of Jamaica or something, and we've got all the land and water. They're surrounded by the sea, which is salt water. We call it land of many waters. How come Jamaica could be producing all of these products for export? Every supermarket, any big supermarket you go into in the United States, they're Jamaican products. Frozen cassava, frozen this, plantain chips. You don't see anything in Guyana except in the real, highly populated Guyanese communities such as New York City or maybe in Florida. But you don't see it any place. But Jamaica is all over the place. So again, we have to, to start planning our future. To me, on agriculture. As long as you've got food, everything else can come, and you can exist with food afterward. Because Food will be, like I said, the UN is worried to death right now, and Guyana should use that as part of, as foundation of our planning for the future. It is not all. We need to take advantage of this short window of time for all, take the revenues and invest it in things like agriculture and education, and sustainable energy for the long term after all is gone.
Yeah. Also, the government, the current government speaks a lot about creating jobs, creating jobs, creating jobs, and yet, it seems like they're overlooking the fact that many of the um, unemployed ex-sugar workers and all of that, the people in parts of Region Six, Berbice, whatever, are, know their way around a farm. They understand farming and planting and, plant husbandry and things like that. And if we're really going to provide jobs for this country, it can't just be in oil and oil support services. Agriculture, to me, would be the easiest thing in which to provide employment for people in Guyana, planting, because this is something that many Guyanese already know. How to operate, how to plant and operate. Maybe not on a very large scale, but they understand it. They like it. They come from the land, from the soil, so they understand.
And to add to that, Ewart, and again, some of us might be too young to remember the great vision by a past leader, Lyndon Forbes Sampson, born to feed, house, and clothe the nation by 1976, when you know food products were banned. Now, some did, some agree, and some did. Everybody had a kitchen garden in those days. Everybody, didn't matter, every single person. The government would give out, seeds. You go plant. We had an agricultural bank. You know, Now, the vision may not have been implemented the right way, or we've not have achieved the success that was. But those are the kinds of vision that we need to look forward to. We've got all the natural setting for it, and the other thing about agriculture, we need to change the mindset as to what agriculture is. People look at agriculture, farming. You go, you get your
Yep.
hands dirty. You
Yep.
deal with cow dung and all this kinds of stuff. We need to change that mindset. Agriculture is much bigger than that. There's the downstream part of that too. Now everything is
And the
mechanized.
integration of
Absolutely,
technology today.
absolutely. And even in the farming, beyond the farming, you've got the downstream, and which is where the money is in manufacturing. It's a chemical engineering field where, because you've got to process the food with chemical plants, and then you've got to can it, then you've got to export it. So it's a big collection of business enterprise in engineering, in science, in everything, business,
Marketing, accounting,
marketing.
logistics, all of
Yes.
Right.
these things.
So everything applies. Everything applies.
It's huge. It's a huge industry, and like you rightly said, Vince, I think that's a great point for you to make, for persons to stop looking at it in a particular way, because we have young people that look at agriculture and they're like, oh, but I don't want to go farming and planting. But the multi-millionaires that is involved in farming industry and that sector altogether, those persons, some of them never put their hands to soil a day in their
Yep.
life. And these are things. But I know you mentioned also that the products that we have. I want to give credit to a lot of work that Valerie Lowe did when we were in office, in which she did a lot of work in actually the value adding process to a lot of indigenous products, and she was going down a very good line with that. But since we left office, I didn't see any work done to continue that, which is very sad. And also, sometimes I can tell people, I would encourage person, when you go out there to the supermarkets and stuff, buy products that are being produced in Guyana. I don't use any other cooking oil other than that what is being produced right here in Guyana. I don't use any other honey other than what is being produced right here in Guyana. We need to have that mindset. We need to be the ones that are consuming our products, and the government needs to play their part in cushioning the industry so that they will be able to do their packaging up the scale and all of that, so that those items could be exported, and persons will be able to actually see Guyanese products in these supermarkets overseas and so on. But we
Yep.
have to move on from this point, guys. So I want to actually touch on the fact that we saw today in the news Ashni Singh out there giving the $250,000, as you say, one-off payment to severed sugar workers. And went at length in several programs to speak about this matter, because we are simply saying that the persons that are being given these monies now were paid their severance before. They were paid their severance whilst the coalition was in office. So this is just a double payment being given to them. And I made a point before, and I'm going to make it again, that if Ashni Singh finds it fitting to give them more, to give severed workers more money on top of the money that they got, then he should only find it fitting to give the persons that they fired, those severed workers that they fired during a pandemic, the same money as well. And once he is not doing that, and once he is showing that distinction and that variation in the persons that he's actually taking care of, we can only view it as a political stunt and them just giving to who they believe support them. What are your thoughts, guys?
Well, that's it. It's just like you described. It's a political stunt. If the first payoff was enough to keep these people in line, they wouldn't have to give them more money and money again. What happens 3 months, 6 months, a year down the line? Will they have to find some excuse to give people money every few months? It's unsustainable. And of course, it's obvious what's happening here. But again, it's not sustainable, and it'll come back to haunt them. I'm sure of that.
Yeah, I know that politics is, people, some people characterize it as a dirty game, and you do whatever it takes to maintain your power. But I think the most important, the fundamental foundation of politics, first of all, you get into politics to serve the people, okay? But it's not only serving the people, and it's not only serving one section or one sector of the people. It's getting into serving every single individual, whether they voted for you or not. Those are some of the
Mhm.
fundamental. The other thing is to treat every single citizen fairly. And if you stand by your principles, and everybody believe that they're being treated fairly, regardless of how much it may hurt under the circumstance, that's the best politics. But when questions are being raised that one sector or one section of the population is treated totally different, as in this case, it is not good politics. Maybe I'm not a good politician or not a politician, period. But to me, that's the best politics you can have, is to treat everybody fairly, based on the conditions, and not appear to be discriminating. And apparently that's what's happening here, and it's not good for the people and for the country. Period.
Mm. Well, it's a glaring inconsistency. Persons can see very clearly what is going on. Everyone sees it, and what it says to me is that the PPP doesn't care. They don't care how these things are viewed. They don't care about the perception in the minds of Guyanese. They just go ahead and do it, and you have to deal with that because we're in government, and what we do, we don't have to be held accountable for. And this is the action that we've been seeing from them from day one. But when they're giving out a payout of $250,000 to persons that were already paid severance, and then we have this 7% that public servants have to deal with, this across the board 7%. One must do the calculation, and we must look at the difference, because what it does, 7% of $70,000 is $4,900. So when they do the retroactive that takes it back to January, it is only going to be $58,800. And to add insult to injury, that $58,800 will be taxed. So with all of that now, and then you come and you give a payout of $250,000 to persons that were paid before, It is a slap in the faces of the public servants of this country, and it is very sad that the minister did not find it fitting to compensate the persons that they fired. And that is where we are with that discussion. But Dr. Vince, I'm looking at the time right now, and I definitely want you to come in. I can't have you here and not speak about the not speak about the Natural Resources Fund Act. I mean, this is your area of expertise, and once we have you on, we will definitely gain knowledge from this discussion by having you comment on it. So, where are we? Please walk us through what is going on right now. What is your interpretation of what the PPP is trying to do with this act, and how? What should we expect?
Well, let me give first of all, I know that just to bring everyone up to speed as to what this whole Natural Resource Act means. It's also called you're gonna hear it's called the Sovereign Wealth Fund by many, but we've been talking about production of oil. We're right in the middle of producing oil, and we're gonna have a million barrels by 2027. So we've been focusing on those issues which are bad enough that, like you said, the government is just going ahead and making decisions whether it's means damage to the environment or not. They're going ahead anyway. So we've been paying attention to those. The audit. You remember we had the issue with the audit that where we stuck out with that bill for 9.5 billion that we hadn't even
Yes.
audited, and we're not even sure it's going to be audited. So those are some issues, but it so happened that all of these things are coming together so fast that it's difficult because people get confused, as to which is which, but it's moving so fast. So the next step now that the money is starting to roll in, of course, is how do we spend the money as it's rolled in. So that was why this Sovereign Wealth Fund, the act, the Natural Resources Act was developed. Is how do we spend the money? It was developed with three main objectives. One is to put aside for the rainy day or for future generations. Well, I want to say that we are not only in a rainy day today, we're in a thunderstorm or even a hurricane as far as I'm concerned, which was the intent of the fund. Secondly, it was set up. The second objective was to make sure that we take care of the instability of prices. For example, when prices go down, we've seen it happen in many countries. Prices go down, and then you in the middle of a project, you got to shut the project off. That's not good planning. So it's to make sure you've got that fund where you can come in and continue that project. And then of course the third was to have a development plan with priorities of projects for development. Well, to get back to the one with the rainy day fund, and of course this is my personal opinion on this, and I've held this from day one, even with
Your
my past
your
administration.
expert opinion,
That,
mind you. That
that's
we
right,
will
my
take that as
expert
your
opinion.
expert opinion.
And I have always maintained. I know it was very good intention. You remember those three objectives? Very good intention when we went into this, and I've always said that I cannot. When you talk about the rainy day, we're currently, like I said, in a thunderstorm. I do not. It's not that I disagree with the structure and the intent and the principles behind the Sovereign Wealth Fund. I think we need to move more aggressively in some urgent needs. For example, we know in our household, you don't go invest money when you don't have food on the table or you don't have shelter. The only money that you invest in the stock market or wherever else, or even put money in a bank, is when you take care of those basic needs: food, shelter, health care. Those are the priorities. And I'm saying, before I put any money in that wealth fund, I would take all of the money right now and take care of those basic needs: free education, free health care, for all. Make sure that we've got an energy sufficiency, energy independence, sustainable energy. After all, for example, renewable energy, invest in those. Agriculture, for example. So those infrastructure. I would take the short window to spend that money. Now, I'm not saying to put aside a small amount, because my understanding was that as part of how this structure is set up, to manage it, there were going to be like 22 individuals who cut off, who don't have any affiliation with the government. I don't know how you find that in Guyana. That, that's the intent. Um, it was with good intentions. However, you know, the intent was to draw off. I see numbers such as 4% per year. That's ridiculous. I'm going to draw off only 4% per year to do what? Now I would like to see that reverse. How about 90% of it to be drawn off, at least initially, to make sure that we become rich, and then we could afford. Because and then I hear, well, some of the the references, well, this is needed because Norway has one, Dubai has one. You know why they have it? Because they're able to afford the basic needs, their food, education, healthcare. They already have that. It's like our household. We could invest now that we've taken care of it. We do not have that yet. We need to me, we need to be putting that money into those basic needs. And then we talk about, this whole rainy day thing. There's no better investment as far as I'm concerned, even if you consider that it's for long term for the youths of the country. Like I said, half of the country is below the age of 25 and below. So after all is gone, for the next 60 years, half of our population will still be alive. So to me, the future is today. And I think we should invest most of the money urgently today rather than waiting for tomorrow, because we've got so much need. We're like, look at the food crisis we currently have. Look at the education, crisis we currently have. Healthcare, we want the best healthcare in the world, the best education in the world. That's where we should be spending this money rather than putting it aside. Now, here's the other thing, the other serious risk. These banks, it's going to be an international bank. I know that for a fact because I know I happen to know of a few that sent in proposals to manage it. They're going to be making their money regardless. So they're going to be investing our money. What are the investments? What are the risks of these investments? So we put in this money, maybe in the stock market, I don't know, in bonds, whatever it is. So we putting this money at risk. What happens if we get another a world economic crisis downturn like we saw in 2008, 2009? And we're putting that money at risk. Now, I'm not saying that's where it's going, but, what happens if we get that? Because I hear a lot of these countries with the sovereign wealth fund are bragging how much money they've made. Well, trust me, the more risk you take, that's probably where you're going to make the most money. And there's no reason why we should be risking it when we can invest it and it's guaranteed. You invest it today in the youths, it's going to pay off big dividends in the future, and the future is now. So those are the kinds of things that I believe that to build on. We can build on the same foundation. We have the same principle, the same intent, but I think we need to change the priorities in terms of how the money is withdrawn and how much. And initially, I would go for at least 90 to 100% of it coming out and investing it immediately. I prefer to take the risk in that investment rather than having it sitting someplace in some bank where an international bank is making all the money while we are still starving. We're without shelter. We don't have any proper health care and education and infrastructure and those type of things. So that's, of course, that's my personal opinion. I'm not speaking for the AFC, but would hope that
Your expert opinion, Doctor Adams. I want to add a little bit there because I look at it and I take all your points as sound points. You're an expert in this area and you know exactly what you're talking. So there's absolutely nothing that you've said that persons that can actually debate. Now, one of the things that we need to acknowledge as Guyanese is the fact that the people went into office, and one of the first things that they did in the National Assembly was increase the debt ceiling, both the internal and the external debt ceiling. And when they did that, persons it just was brushed aside. But I know we had a vigorous debate in the National Assembly. And again, Kemraj Ramjatan spoke extensively on this matter when he was speaking about the fact that you can't be running the country like that. But they had to do that because when they went into office, they reduced so many things, and they were trying to be so nice and friendly towards the business community. And I want to say at this point that we support the business community. The Alliance of Change has a great relationship with the business community. But when the PPP went into office, they made so many changes that what happened is that they were receiving less taxes, but yet they came to the National Assembly with the biggest budget ever. And when they did that, it begs the question of where they're going to get the money from. And at mid-year of this year, the PPP had already, the government of the country had already issued over $200 billion in debentures. And when you think about the way in which they're doing things, it's like at one point I would have said that they were borrowing against the amount of money that is in the sovereign wealth fund. But then now they have completely exceeded, their borrowings have exceeded the money that is actually in the sovereign wealth fund. So even if, and this is how, the way in which they're operating, Dr. Adams, is if even if they lose the next election, which we think they will, even when they lose the next election, the party in power will be inheriting tremendous debt that they are racking up. And they don't care. They don't care what is going on with the sovereign wealth fund because they are borrowing more money than we actually have in there. And we've been making this point, I made this point several times. I believe that the former Minister of Finance also came and made the same point recently. And it was in the media. They called him in after, the PPP. That's how they operate. But Ewart, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, you said something interesting there that, the word on the ground is the sentiment, the mood is that the PPP will lose the next election. Of course, we're years away from that, but right now people are not happy. When you think about all of the money that and all of the debt that they're incurring, you have to realize that this money, when it comes into the government, is then spent, and so it gets out to their supporters and friends and family and all of that. So whether they win or lose the next election, they're gone. The money's spent. Right. So they of course will leave it for whoever is in government the next time. And so people have to be very, very aware of what is going on. Of course the debt is greater than what's in the sovereign wealth fund, because perhaps they don't expect to be here in 5 years. They would have already gotten their spoils, and like I said, they're gone. People have to really, really hold their feet to the fire on this, because I believe this is what's really happening. The place is being looted, under all sorts of pretexts and or pretenses, and it's shameful. It's shameful.
One of the key, again, fundamentals of good governance is competence. So, and of course, I've had, again, the privilege and opportunity to have worked in government in the US, where competence matters, accountability mattered. Budgets was something that it was, I wouldn't, like sacred. When you put forward a budget, it better match up with and you had so much checks and balances. In our situation, there appears to be no checks and balance. One person decided, I'm going to spend money, and then you look at, well, money's going to come in from oil without even putting the two together. Even in our household, you never spend more than you never try to spend more than your income, but we being blinded and carried away by all of these hundreds of millions that are coming in. Except when you look at the numbers, like you rightly said, Jarretto, here we are. When I look at what we have in the sovereign wealth fund, is what about, the last I saw was 560 million. Let's say it's up to 700 million now. Guess what? We just got stuck with a bill for 9.5 billion. And I just read,
Yep.
I just read in the newspapers today where Exxon has declared that the Liza 1 and Liza 2 and the Liza 1, I think it's up to, it's, oh no, they're planning to invest $30 billion in Guyana. Guess who's going to be stuck with most of that bill? All of that investment cost goes against us. So I don't know when we're going to be able to catch up with paying back for all the debts that these are companies are incurring, which is, in compliance with the contract. But it's just a case we're not even looking at the numbers. We just,
Yep.
getting excited about the numbers and looking at just one side of the equation, spending, and just borrowing, and not only creating debts, because remember, these debt carries an interest burden
Correct.
on top of it that is compounded. So
Yep.
guess what? So we're even with the debt itself, we're even they're gonna even ballooning of that debt. I don't know when we're gonna be able to catch up. Like I said, I for one, and I've made it very clear, and I know the AFC and the opposition, we're all in favor. As a matter of fact, this is one thing that we all agree with Vice President Jagdeo is to produce as much oil as possible, as quickly as possible, do it safe and environmentally soundly, which we've got major issues with, of course. But at the same time, you've got to be prudent in how do you manage and spend that money. That's the area that I don't think most of us are not comfortable with, because it just if somebody wakes up and they decide, well, okay, we're gonna go borrow here, and of course, when you borrow, remember, when you borrow from a country, this China, where they suddenly got extra leverage now over
Yep.
you. Look what's happening in Africa now with China. China's taking away airports and lots of infrastructure because they fund it and they can't pay back the money. Is that the kind of situation do we think we want to get in? And I'm afraid if we do not watch it and make the right decision, that's we're going to be owned by not only foreign companies like the Exxons of the world, but by foreign governments if we're not careful.
It's a really sad situation, I think, and I know we've been able to bring a lot of clarity to what is going on, particularly with this the sovereign wealth fund and the way in which things are going on. Unfortunately, guys, this is our program time. We are over by a minute or so. So I want to thank you for being on, both of you. It was a pleasure. Thank you to all the viewers that joined us this evening, persons in Borbice, persons joining us on social media, in the diaspora, and around the world. So have a pleasant evening, and be sure to join us again next Saturday at 8 p.m. as we discuss more facts and bring you the truth about what is going on in Guyana. Thank you.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Joretta. Thanks, Ewart.
Thank you, Dr. Vince. Thank you, Joretta. And for those who want more information, please go to